Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Can we have another hand for our Secretary of Homeland Security? I was all ready to tell you about how his grandfather was a Tuskegee Airman and he's from Queens and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, it's good to be with you guys. It's certainly a pleasure, and I want to congratulate MPAC for yet another successful year, bringing people together, empowering our community, making sure we are at the table so that we can make the case for civil rights, for human rights, for inclusion, and to make this country of ours, America, a more American place because we're here active in it. I'd like to just mention a few things to you that are on my mind, if I may. And one of them is this whole conversation our community has had about countering violent extremism. You all are well familiar with the topic. And one of the things that occurs to me is that it is entirely appropriate for the main conversation to happen within the Muslim community. I sincerely believe that if people are trying to say that murder, mayhem, and beheading innocent people is Islam, that it must be incumbent upon the Muslim community to say, no, it's not. And that conversation should happen internally. It should happen with scholars. It should happen in community meetings. It should happen in mosques. We should generate a whole dialogue around what really are the parameters of this. And so we've had this debate about what's the proper role of the government. I believe the government's role is actually secondary in this conversation. They have a legitimate role around public safety, national security, but the real policing of who we are, what we believe, I believe is our job. And I believe for the last several years, we have been in a defensive crouch. Mostly what we've been saying is we individually are innocent. We are. The Muslim community is blameless in terms of terrorism. I can tell you that individual terrorists who have done horrible things should and must be held accountable for what they do, but what they do is not who we are. That's obvious. But after we make it clear to ourselves and the rest of the world, I think we ought to huddle and start an internal community conversation and dialogue about really what is our level of tolerance for people who would promote fundamentally un-Islamic ideals. I know that right now, if somebody brought in, if we were having dinner right now, if somebody brought in a big plate of pork chops, somebody would say, oh, this is haram, brother, you can't serve that. And if somebody walked around here saying, oh, red or white, you know, people would be like, oh, well, that's haram too. But is murdering an innocent person haram? We should speak against it. We should be found not speaking to the larger community of other faiths so much as within our own community. And I'm telling you, we need people to write articles about it. We need people to give public speeches about it. We need people to write plays about it. And about how the real values of unity, the real values of compassion, the real values of generosity, the real values of confronting and assertively confronting racism, which is in our faith, is something we need to really push out to the community in a very robust way. And so again, you know, it's this conversation that we had around what should we or should we not. Is the CVE at the White House, should the Muslim community go to it? Should we not go to it? My thought is, it's fine to debate that, but if we are having this internal conversation and robustly debating these issues ourselves, talking about the text, talking about the hadith, the surah, the sunnah, all these things about when and where, you know, what's appropriate and what isn't, I think that we would have. I think it would help us bring about a tremendous renaissance. And then when the government shows up, we could say, well, you know, we're already handling this. But it is something that I would urge us to do, and I hope it's a conversation that we have. I can tell you this. I'll never forget the time that I was at Peter King's Homeland Security Committee, and Andre might remember this too. He wanted to do a hearing on violent Muslim extremism. I think I talked with Andre about it, and I know I talked to many of you, and I asked the question, like, should I even go? Because I was telling Peter King he should not have the hearing is inappropriate and it's wrong. And if you want, and we're not trying to apologize for any Muslim who commits bad acts, but there's a whole lot of other people who commit bad acts. And if there's any doubt about it, what about the three young people who were murdered in Chapel Hill? And there's many, many more than that. So we had that dialogue, and I decided rather than not be part of that conversation, I decided to go and be part of that dialogue to try to shape the outcome of the conversation. But I'm telling you, we have the power to shape the whole national conversation. And the real power is within us. So MPAC is at the leading edge of driving the dialogue, being a part of the conversation. And I'm really looking forward and want to encourage us to figure out how do we have our own internal CVE conversation where really it's just us in the room listening to our scholars, listening to our writers, listening to our imams, and listening to regular people who just show up at the masjid for Jummah prayers and getting the opinion of everybody so that we can try to drive a national consensus. Now, the last thing I want to say about this is this. It's very good that the scholars came and wrote that letter to al-Baghdadi over there and condemned what he was doing. I thought this was a very good sign, and I'm glad about it. But we also need to include another group of people in the conversation about who and what we are and what our beliefs are. And that is people who can help send a compelling message internally and externally. 22 pages might appeal to some religious scholars, but to the average young person who's on the net trying to figure out who he is and what he's about and who he wants to follow and who he wants to associate himself with or herself, 22 pages of scholarly material is not going to cut it. We need some 1 minute, 2 minute videos. We need some Vines and some Skypes, and we need to boil down a tight message about the essence of the Muslim identity that we can push out to our own folks. And again, I'm encouraging not a us and them conversation, but a us and us conversation. And so I don't know where we take this idea, but it's been on my heart to say this to you, and I hope that you take it seriously. In other words, thank you all very much, and have a wonderful evening.